Best Movie Ratings is a one-stop, easy and elegant movie ratings experience. Stop wasting your time on bad movies and download the world's best movie ratings app from the iTunes App Store now.
Hi everyone, this is Ahmed Al-Karimli and welcome to Be Efficient TV. The mission of this web TV show is to boost the efficiency of your business and life through tips and tricks from leading experts. And today I have with me David Allen. He is an expert in productivity and time management. He is the best-selling author of Getting Things Done. Welcome to the show, David.
Glad to be here, Ahmed. Thanks.
It's a pleasure to have you. So from studying history to more than 35 different professions before the age 35, take us through this journey and then how you became an productivity expert, and you worked in so many different jobs like a magician, karate teacher, travel agent, salesman. Take us through this amazing journey.
Well, obviously, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. So not really having a career. I thought I was going to be an academic. I was studying history. I loved history. At some point, I decided I wanted my own enlightenment instead of studying people who had theirs. So I decided to hop out of the academic world and go into the more day-to-day kind of real world and experience those kinds of things just for myself. And again, I wasn't really clear. I didn't have any particular drive to be in any one particular profession or the other. So I wound up saying, okay, well, what's a good job that I can still use to pay the rent while I'm doing this long-term exploration? And I wound up, of course, working with a lot of friends, actually entrepreneurs, small business people, and I wasn't the entrepreneur. I was sort of the number two guy. So I was a really good number two guy. I'd walk in and usually, I'd look around and say, well, obviously, how can I improve the situation? What value can I add? And 95% of the time, the value was improving their process. They were crazy makers. They'd sort of, made this thing up and tried to make it work. And, a lot of what was creating their problems and their stress were inefficient, ineffective systems and processes. And I just learned, probably since I was born, I just wake up in the morning and go, how much easier can I do anything I'm doing? I thought everybody thought that way, but obviously that's something probably unique to me. I just kept going, how lazy can I be and still get the work done? So I looked at that, and of course, after I would get somewhat bored after I fixed their process, and then looked around, and I just moved around and followed my nose essentially, and that. Over time, I began to see a lot of common denominators across all these small businesses. And at the same time, I recognized and realized that I really like to come in and sort of work on a project-by-project basis. And then I realized they actually pay people to do that, and they call them something called consultant. And I grew up in a world where that was not a viable, I didn't even know what it was, and that they actually pay people to do that. So that's interesting. So at one point, I sort of hung out my shingle and said, okay, now I are one. And then I said, okay, well, let me see if I can just go sell my services on a project-by-project basis, because that's ultimately kind of what I like to do to begin with. And that worked. Of course, I got very hungry very fast to find out, okay, what are some of the models that are foolproof, that, I don't like making mistakes, and I like, making sure that I produce value. And also, I like to be able to find something that applied to everybody, that wasn't specific to a particular business or a particular industry of any sort. And I had some great mentors back then where I learned little pieces of what then ultimately became the GTD, or Getting Things Done methodology. So I didn't make all that up. There were a little piece here and a little piece there. And I began to then utilize those, first of all, for myself. I mean, I was out of control and needed more help than anybody. So I was looking for these techniques for myself. How do I stay clear, and how do I stay focused on what I was doing as my world got more sophisticated and complex? Early on, I got very attracted to what I refer to now as the strategic value of clear space. I certainly had a lot of training in that in the martial arts, where you had a lot of practice of clearing your head, kind of meditative kinds of exercises, so that when 4 people jump you in a dark alley, you can be fully present, as opposed to having 3,000 emails, stuck back in your brain. So being clear was a very practical and a very real thing. Also, it was a real great experience to be able to have essentially nothing on your mind, to have clear space, to be able to focus, put your attention where you want it with 100%, effectiveness and focus. So all of those kind of things kind of came together. There was no one big epiphany. It was just a long string of epiphanettes, as I say, that I began to put together. But as I was then experimenting and experiencing these for myself, I then turned around and used them with my clients, and it worked. It all worked. And people started to implement these techniques, and without exception, it created more of a sense of stability, more of a sense of control, more of a sense of focus, more of a sense of clarity. I said, wow, that's kind of cool. So that was, that's the beginning of another very long story, because, as I say, it took me 20, 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out, and that it actually was unique, and that nobody else seemed to have come up with it the way I did. And that's when I decided to write Getting Things Done. But I've been doing this work one-on-one and desk side with executives and entrepreneurs and whatever for years. And even early on, I'd been asked by a major corporation to come in and take the work I was doing with individuals and executives and to format a seminar around that so that we could reach hundreds of people or thousands of people, not just one at a time, with this best practice. And so that began, my career essentially in the corporate training world, where a lot of my material was then implemented and brought in by human resources or training and development, or some executives that just said, hey, wow, I get this. This is really great. I want all of my staff to get this and understand it and apply it as well. So that was back in the early 80s. And since then, then 20 years passed, and I had a lot more of experience. And by that point, I figured, okay, this was bulletproof stuff, and nobody could punch a hole in it. So I guess it was time to write the manual. So that's what I did when Getting Things Done. When I first published that in 2001 in hardback, I really wrote it, and I really put it all in there. I didn't.
So you were a consultant for 20 years before publishing the book?
Yeah, and I was doing that consulting and training. I was also doing quite a bit of stand-up 1 and 2 day seminars inside of large organizations and corporations that were bringing me in for that purpose. But at the same time, literally thousands of hours one-on-one desk side with some of the busiest and brightest and sharpest people on the planet testing this model. So that was really my game. I mean, writing was not my day job for sure.
And on a personal level, did you were like a good employee? You like the employment life, and how you noticed this shift through what you called it as a consultant, entrepreneur? Can you compare these two lives?
I probably, again, I was a really good number 2 guy. So I if somebody had a vision and somebody had energy and momentum, then I was a really good guy to help that process. So I didn't really have my own entrepreneurial direction, if you will, until at some point, I had 2 or 3 partners, and we went through various incarnations of sort of consulting, little boutique kind of consulting practices. And at one point I said, look, this thing that I'm doing seems to be pretty unique. I seem to be the major, flame bearer or flag holder of it. And I bought out 2 partners, and then my wife at the time and I just decided to sort of scale back what we were doing to just her and me. Essentially, my name had more brand equity than the process, and it was a lot easier to sell a personality than a process. So I said, okay, let me put my name on the masthead. So we became the David Allen Company. So in the current version of company, that really started in 1996, 97. So, and that was when I decided, okay, I better write the book. It's a good business card, but also I figured if I got run over by a bus, somebody at some point would figure all this out. But I thought I better write the manual. And also because I never had enough time to go into all of the implications and applications of the detail of what this model really signified. When I even working one-on-one with people or even in a training context. So I said, I know a lot more and have had a lot of miles on my tires here and a lot of experience that I better just get that down into a manual. So that essentially became Getting Things Done.
What helped you the most in terms of marketing yourself as a consultant before the book and after the book? After the book, the ripple effect started, or now I assume that you don't do that much marketing because you are in demand. But like back then till this day, how did you do that, and how many employees you have now?
Well, Yeah, there's lots of versions of that story, along many years. I never really did any marketing per se. I thought I was not a very good marketer or a salesperson. It turned out I could wind up selling it because I was so enthused about the product. And I think my sales strategy was do the most fabulous good work I could, keep the same phone number and take advantage of all the opportunities to engage with people who had any interest. That was pretty simple. That's the way it still is. That's kind of still what I do. Never really had a lot of success with trying to get people to market it who actually didn't buy into the technology or to the methodology itself. There are probably people that could do that, but I never had much success in doing that. As I began to, I had some big corporate clients that because of their demand, I had needed to train other trainers to be able to deliver this work. So I began to scale, at least at a minor level, this by getting other people that were coaching and training this who understood the getting things done methodology and were really good at coaching and training. And so built a small staff doing that. And they were the people who basically sold it because they go out and do great work. And people said, wow, I want them to come back. So, my sales training and my training were, go do it. If they want you back, you're in.
How many people do you have now?
Well, now in the company, I think there are probably 25, 28, and then we have several now contract, trainers and consultants that work with us on demand as we need that. And we're now franchising our training program globally. So we're getting franchisees and we're just starting a global program of train the trainer and training master trainers so they can train and certify trainers for the Getting Things Done training within their own regions and languages. And that's a big project, as you can imagine.
So what you need from the franchisees, like how much they pay, franchise fee, how long the training takes, what's the requirement?
It's very unique given the different markets. I mean, obviously Panama, is a different market than India, and we actually have partnered with a company that is actually structuring all of the business and management side and legal side of the franchise process. smcov.com, SMCOV is our partner in that regard. They were the co-COOs of Franklin Covey many years ago, and David Covey and Stefan Marduk. So they're our partners now that are actually because they have and familiar with that network and all of the ins and outs of how to do that. I looked at that possibility. I said, this is much bigger gum than I know how to chew. So I was delighted to have some of the best in the world show up and say, hey, let's partner with you too, because we can do that. So our company is responsible and accountable just for the IP, for the intellectual property, and certifying the master trainers, and then maintaining a community of practice of our trainers around the world and building that. So we're in the middle of that right now. And we're already in it for 2+ years, but it's just beginning to get traction. It's one of the reasons Catherine and my wife and I moved to Amsterdam 6 months ago.
So, they are based in Amsterdam, the company?
No, I am.
To be in the middle of the world, or just?
It's kind of to be in the middle of the world for a couple of reasons. I mean, I have a CEO now of our small company and still in our office in California, in Ojai, California, near Santa Barbara. So we're still maintaining that office, and we have a pretty virtual company. I mean, just like we're talking Skype here, well, that's what we do all day long. So we're around the world. Our head of our David Allen Academy doing the training, she's in Medellin, Colombia. I'm in Amsterdam. Our folks, we've got a number of folks in California, some in New York, and then we've got our network of people we're growing around the world. So we're starting to get a good bit of traction in Europe, the UK and Ireland. We've got great partners there, and also one in Scandinavia, one for the Germanic countries, and Middle and Eastern Europe starting to pick up. I was just in Budapest supporting our startup there. So it's slowly sort of spreading around the world. It's been part of a big vision for a long time. At some point, I really realized that this methodology had no cultural bias. There was no gender bias. There's no personality bias. Everybody needs this. Anybody who needs to keep track of more than one thing, that they can't finish when they think of it, can utilize the value that this methodology brings. And it always, again, without exception, improves conditions. It allows people to flourish more of whatever they're doing, which looks very different for a 24-year-old rock musician or a 54-year-old attorney, with 3 kids. but it's still the same methodology and still the ability for them to flourish within their own terms, to give them more room, more space, more ability to focus on the more meaningful things that are current. And meaningful at 24 is a different set of things than meaningful at 54. But it allows the same kind of freedom and the same kind of flourishing. So all that said, I said, wow, at some point, with the success of the book, I mean, the book slowly became a bestseller. And, it wasn't like an overnight, but certainly the first year it reached the bestseller mark in terms of hardback. And it's continued. It's stayed on the bestseller list for, golly, now 13 years. And so I figured, well, at that point, my wife and I decided we could just keep this boutique and me just do my own speaking engagements and my own sort of individual thing, because a lot of business gurus, that's their, they don't want to manage people either. But at a certain point, we said, but the world keeps knocking on our door. I get an email, 3 a week from all over the world going, oh, David, this is fabulous stuff. I read your book. It changed my life. I want to be a consultant for you. I want to take this to Romania. I want to take this to Japan. I want to take, whoa. Well, I said, I guess we can't really ignore that. And because this stuff does produce such great value, and that's a lot of my wife's and my interest is supporting how much good can we do on the planet before we leave it, So so we decided to take that route and say, okay, how do we scale this? And obviously the strategies there were partnerships with people who had channels that could help distribute this, as well as using technology. And that's still part of the big strategy. And then so we're, as a business, essentially our focus is still staying small, high quality, what we call, the small giants, a little company that's doing, extremely high quality global work, and then with partners.
So if somebody asks for David Allen to speak in somewhere in the world, you send your franchisee to speak, or it's only for the training you send the franchisees? Depends on how much they're willing to pay. Okay.
I'm the big bucks, but if they want the guy who wrote the book, then if it's supply and demand, if I can get it, that allows me the freedom to go do that. So I just came, I was just in Dubai, I was just in Oslo, I was just in Nashville, Tennessee, so all over. So that's not a huge part of what I'm doing. I mean, I'm still very much involved in helping craft our training design, for the world, and also helping support those franchisees, as well as our work back in the U.S. too. So it's kind of whoever wants it at whatever scale. So people can get everything from virtual coaching over the computer, around the world. We're doing quite a bit of that. We have 2 or 3 coaches that are fabulous at that back in the States, but they do it all over the world just through that medium. Obviously, every once in a while I get somebody that says, David, hang out with me for a year so I never have to learn this again. And I say, okay, let's do one-on-one. Cost you a bunch, but you get 10 sessions and you'll never need me or anything like this again, because you'll have that embedded as a set of behaviors and everything in between. So, large keynote speeches. I have a great staff. I mean, there's some really quality folks who have their own brand and reputation now, who are really, really good at, doing keynote speeches and seminars and one-on-one coaching.
So let's get into technicalities more deep. So what are the 5 steps or stages to apply order to chaos, to organize our life and business?
Yeah, well, first of all, you need to capture or collect or identify the things that are not on cruise control, the things that are on your mind, things that have your attention. And secondly, you need to then clarify exactly what those things are, what they mean, and what you're going to do about them, if anything. Thirdly, you need to organize the results of that thinking and decision making in terms of the content that you come up with of the work to do and what things mean and so forth that you have incorporated or that you've received or taken in or thought up. After you organize it, then you need to build that organization system with a reflection process and a review process, so you can step back and see the totality of your commitments that you made and the work you need to do and the things you need to focus on from the larger perspective regularly. So that then stage 5 is then you engage your attention, your focus, and your resources in a trusted way, because you've seen the whole game and you say, okay, now it's time to make that call. Now it's time to take a nap. Now it's time to work on the strategic plan. Now it's time and those then are made from a place of trust instead of a place of hope and sort of being driven by the latest and loudest. So those are the 5 stages, and I didn't really make those up. I just identified them. That's how you get your kitchen under control as well as your company.
So this system works on everything. Like, can you take us through, like, if we take David Allen as an example, and take us through your life, and what are the tools that you use through this 5 steps process?
Sure. Well, the first step is really, I'd say if there was a most critical step, it's the first one. That is, to capture things that are potentially meaningful to you and put them in the trusted bucket that you will then, sooner than later, then decide what to do about it. And trusted bucket, the least trusted bucket is your head. Now cognitive science has now proven and done a lot of research in the last 20 years to basically validate what my methodology figured out 30 years ago on the street, which is if it's in your head, it's in the wrong place. And your head's for having ideas, but not for holding them. So being able to capture anything, little, big, personal, or professional, so that it doesn't take up more sort of mental or cognitive space than it ought to. You should only have an idea once, unless you just like having the idea. If you keep rehabbing the idea, like, oh, I need to, oh, I should, oh, yeah, I need to, oh, I should, then you're not being appropriately engaged with your own commitment about whatever that thing is. So the step 1 is to identify those things. Very simply, write it down. So obviously the most basic tool for writing things down, right there, it's called paper and pen. Oh, there's a note from this morning. Yeah. So, this is with me probably, 90% of my life started as a harebrained idea, crazy note I took right here. And so just the capture tools, that pen and paper, you can't beat. You can also capture using recording devices. You could Siri a note onto your onto your iPhone. You can, jot yourself a note into Evernote, into your in basket. You can call your own answer machine, leave yourself a message. You can record stuff. You can, there's a lot of ways you can do it. Oftentimes I'm just writing notes and throwing them in my own physical in basket. So it's just a way to make sure that any potential idea that might have value, what I don't want to do is force myself to have to decide and organize what everything means. Then that's what the problem is most people keep all that stuff in their head because they think there's too much work to try to sit down and try to figure out what it all means. And I just discovered a long time ago, I got to get it out first and then just collect it all in one place. And then it actually uses a different part of your brain to then come back and loop back through to decide, okay, what does that note mean? What does that mean to me? And that's stage 2. But the first tools are anything that can capture random ideas, potentially meaningful ideas. And
so if ideas, you write them or digitally or like manually, and if it's like things, you put it in a basket, let's say files or things, the same thing applied on the offline world.
Yeah, all that stuff. Because basically you want them to come into as few of funnels as you can get by with. You need as many as you need. You need one for each medium that you're dealing with. Your email in basket is obviously an automatic one that you're getting stuff you and I are getting stuff piling up in it as we're speaking, right? So it's coming into that funnel. But obviously any kind of physical snail mail, physical paper, physical things, flashlights with dead batteries in them, all that stuff goes into my own in basket. So it's not spread all over the world. It's all accumulated there until I can then make a decision about what I need to do about it, if anything. So yeah, you need digital, you need low tech. Again, obviously carrying notebooks or having spiral notebooks and pen and paper and stuff like that with you is really critical.
Personally, sorry to cut you off. Personally, what you use for this step, like we stay step by step?
Well, I use that little notepad that you saw. I have on my desk, I've got a mid-sized notebook, spiral notebook where I'm taking notes there if I'm sitting at my desk to do that. If I'm anywhere longer than about 20 minutes, and there's a flat surface, you'll see a notepad and a pen. Because who knows when the lightning would strike in terms of some idea or some input that I need to grab quickly. So those things are around and ubiquitously available to me, just the low-tech side of that. My physical in tray is also at my desk. I travel with a red folder labeled in. So when I'm moving around, receipts and note cards and business cards and notes off of hotel notepads and things like that I've written down, all that goes into that red folder, which I may process on the plane or just take the folder back and dump it back into my physical in tray when I get back, to my own office space. And those are pretty much it. I don't use digital capture very much. I mean, I'm a pretty high-tech guy, but that's very dangerous to put stuff in your digital world, because out of sight, out of mind. And
so you don't use Evernote, or like there's another tool, Mind something, Brain something?
Not for the capture phase. Simply because then I have to remember to go back into wherever I dumped it and get it back out again. So it's actually much easier to have it more low-tech and more in my face than to try to capture it that way. I mean, obviously, things are coming into my email, and I'm sometimes on my iPad in a coffee shop, and I have an idea, and I just email myself a note from my iPad into my email. That works fine, because then it'll zoom around that way. When I was in the States, I don't do it over here in the Netherlands yet. I haven't looked into it yet. I haven't really needed it. But in the States, there was a service that had an 800 number, a toll-free number I could just call and just leave a message, and within 5 minutes, it's in my email, just transcribed and in my email. So that was a great way, if I was really on the run, to just capture a random idea and to be able to do that. But for the most part, just a little pocket notepad, it serves that function really, really, really well for me.
So this is the capture stage. Step 2.
Yeah, that's the capture stage, and that's the first one. And that's a big habit for most people to change, because most people think that it's not worth the time to write little stuff down, like I need cat food, or oh, that was a movie you recommended, or that's a great restaurant I should try, or oh, there's a thought I might want to put into the seminar I'm designing. And most people are too lazy to do that, or haven't really realized the value and the necessity, really, of keeping, building an external brain, so that your mind's not sitting there running through all those things, back in some subliminal level. So that's number one, first technique, big habit for most people to change. And everybody's got tools that you can use for that. So that's stage one.
You feel it's dangerous if I have like different lists or things on, let's say, my Evernote or different program, or that just what works for you? Some people do that.
It's dangerous if you let it lie in there longer than 48 hours.
Even if it's a note, like let's say I'm listening to a book and I have to write notes about that specific book, and just notes gonna stay there. When I need them, I will go back to them.
That's reference. If you've already now decided, that's just reference. But if you haven't decided yet, that's what needs to go into your in basket. But you could automatically say, oh, that's just a reference thing, so I'll just stick it where reference goes. So you're just processing it real quick. You just did stage 1, 2, and 3 almost simultaneously. You captured the idea. You said, oh, that's just reference. Let's clarify what it means. And then you parked it where reference goes. That's organized. So that's perfect. What I'm talking about is using Evernote to capture a random idea that you still need to decide what you're going to do about it and what it means to you. Okay. And that's where you have to be very careful not to let that lie fallow. Those are the things.
So you have a note like called basket or something like that. And then how you clarify that step 2? Tell us more about this step. Yeah.
Step 2 is just deciding, what does this stuff mean? And step 2 is a very simple little executive decision tree. You pick something up. First question is it actionable? 2 options, yes or no. If it's no, then it's trash, or it's reference material, or it's something to hold for later assessment, incubate. So the 3 non-actionables are trash and reference and incubate. And then if it is actionable, then you need to ask yourself, okay, what's the very next action I need to take? In other words, if I had nothing else to do but move on this, what would moving look like? Where would that happen? Is that something to do at the computer? Is it something to talk to my partner about? Is it something to buy at the hardware store? What's the next action? And if that one single action won't complete whatever this thing means to you, and that you are committed to finish about it, then you've got a project. Now you have an outcome you need to identify. Oh, get tires in my car. Oh, research this dance class I want to take. Oh, I need to hire an assistant. So those then become projects. So outcome and action are really very, very critical decisions to make about all the actionable things. Those are emails. Those are notes you take from meetings that you still have to decide, what do you now need to do? What did you tell them you were going to do in the meeting? Or what other people said they were going to do, and you need to keep track of that, because you need to keep tabs on other commitments other people have made out there, and keep tracking of that. So those are the decisions you really need to make. Actionable, yes or no. If no, it's trash, reference, or incubate. If yes, then what's the next action? And if there's more than one action, what's the outcome? And so that decision making basically handles everything. That's how you empty your in basket, is by putting it through that drill. But most of what I just said, if you see most people's to-do lists, most people have something that looks kind of like a to-do list, but to-do list, 99% of them I've ever seen are nothing but incomplete lists of still unclear stuff. They've got things like bank on the list, or mom, or doctor. Well, good. They captured something that's probably got their attention. Why is mom? Historical data. You probably had one, but why'd you write her name? Why'd you write mom? Oh, it's her birthday coming. Great. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. So there's still actually. Then what happens?
So they should prioritize this, or they just put it in like tabs or folders called family, or.
First, they have to decide what the heck they're going to do about it. Is mom's birthday something you're going to do something about? Yes or no? That's the first question, right? So you have to say, are you going to do something about it? Yes or no? Right?
Even if it's after 6 months and I want to put a note with a reminder after 5 months, which is before 1 month from the birthday.
That's incubate. You decided not to decide. You just decided you just need to make sure you put it in decide not to decide system. So you just said, no, there's no action right now on it, because that's why incubate goes in the no side. You don't know yet. I'll rethink that a month before mom's birthday. Great.
And then it has to be like a weekly review, because then you forget these things, which is you didn't decide the action for it. This is very critical, because the list keep growing and you don't take any action about it.
Well, there's two kinds of incubate. One kind of incubate is something I want to review regularly because I might want to activate it at any time. There's another kind of incubate that says, I don't even want to be reminded of this until 6 months out. So you don't need to see it until then. So that goes in a tickler file, or goes on your calendar, or goes into some sort of a time-based system that brings that up for you again to say, okay, hey, dude, you told yourself you might want to do this. You want to decide about that yet? So those are the two flavors of incubate. Is regularly reviewed, that you might want to activate at any time. A good example of that would be a class you might want to take, or something you keep telling yourself you might want to learn. Ooh, I'd love to learn to cook Italian, or I want to speak Italian, or I want to take a class in macros on Excel, or web design. Who knows? Those are the kind of things. I might at some point really want to do that. You'd probably want to see that regularly as part of your weekly review.
Why the 48 hours is critical?
Well, how long can you let stuff lie fallow and trust what you're doing?
Okay, let's move to the organize, which is, let's say, filing, emails. Tell us more about this step.
Well, organize, it basically says once you decide what it means, you just park it where those things go. I think I'm the only guy who ever came up with a real definition of what being organized means. It just means that where something is matches what it means to you. So once you decide, hey, what this means to me is just, I want to be reminded of it, a month before mom's birthday, you now decided what that means. Now that goes where those things go. It goes in some system that feeds that back to you that way. If you say this is reference material, notes I took about a book that I might want to refer to at some point in case I'm ever interested to think about that again, then you park that where reference material goes. That's organized. In a way, this is self-evident. But most people have a lot of stuff that is disorganized because they piled up things that mean different things. Most everybody watching or listening to this right now has at least one pile of stuff they've gone psychologically numb to. And the reason is because they've got things that mean different things in that pile. What have you got in your living room on the coffee table? Is that a pile? There's stuff that's still to read. There's stuff that's old and ought to be thrown away. There's stuff that has some article you want to tear and send a copy of that to somebody. And if you have all that in one place, your brain just fries. So I'm not a naturally organized guy, but I get pretty organized because I'm so lazy. I don't want to have to keep thinking what something means. Once I say that's what this means, that goes there. I don't have to keep rethinking what does that mean. Everything in there means that. Everything on my calls list is a call I need to make. Everything on my project list is a more than one step thing I'm committed to finish within a year. Everything on my talk to Catherine list is just something that I need to talk to Catherine about the next time she and I are having sort of the business of life conversations together. So, it's a big kind of duh, but then I don't have to keep rethinking what those things are. When I'm then in a context to then need that stuff that's of that nature, it's already there. And I don't have to go look for it anymore.
What are the systems that you use digitally and, let's say, offline, filing, hanging files? Share with us some of these systems, please.
Sure. Well, probably the primary system is the digital one, on this MacBook that I'm talking to you through right now. We use Lotus Notes in our company. So that's our corporate email and communication and database application generally, for all of our internal communications that we have, as well as that's my email. That's also where I have my task management. I use this piece of software called eProductivity that was designed specifically to sit with Lotus Notes by a technologist friend of mine, Eric Mack. And it was designed really based upon the getting things done model. Just makes it a little bit easier and slicker to be able to then just drag emails and make that an actionable call I need to make and things like that. So, but essentially just the task management function inside of that. So that's got all my lists of projects and my different action lists. Also,
there is an app for it also. You can sync and see it through your phone or only through your computer.
You can. It's a little clunky in terms of synchronizing into the iOS world. It can do that, but I almost never refer to my smartphone for my action list. A little bit every once in a while, but most of the work that I do is, I work out of my home and that's where my office space is, or I just travel around to the coffee shop with my laptop and that's where I do my work. So essentially most of all the reminders of stuff I need to see, including calendar as well as action lists and projects and so forth, are all just sitting in Lotus Notes, and I use that on my laptop. I can see, obviously, it's nice to, synchronize calendars and other kinds of lists of things and some of the reference material I have, so that when I'm moving around, I have access to that. But yeah, it's not perfect. There's probably no perfect system out there yet that kind of integrates all of those things. And then I have various other kinds of tools. Reference is all over the place. Reference could be within my, Microsoft Office structure on the computer, could have just all kinds of hierarchies of directories and subdirectories, that are all reference material, based upon topical stuff. Lotus Notes, we probably got 20, 25 active Lotus Notes databases that we all share and synchronize, across the company, all kinds of stuff in there. We have a CRM. We use LongJump, which is a CRM, which is, for specific kinds of, obviously, client, related reference material. I use Evernote personally for a lot of, I don't use Evernote for reminders. I use it for reference. And it's a great reference tool because you can cut and paste stuff right out of the web. It's in the cloud, syncs to all my stuff.
And you use tags or folders? How you organize your things inside the Evernote?
I use notebooks and stacks. So basically, when you drag a notebook over another notebook, it makes a stack. And so I've got a stack called locales, like locations, and then each location that I like to keep track of restaurants or people I know there or things I might want to do when I get back there is its own notebook that has its own things inside of it. So, it's an interesting, taxonomy essentially of how you structure it. It took me about 3 to 6 months to get really comfortable with how to structure Evernote. It's because it's such a powerful and such a simple tool, it can blow you away trying to figure out how do I create stacks or whatever. I found tags to be unwieldy, as have most people I know, simply because you have to try to remember what was the tag name that I used for it, and it just takes too much work. So it raises the barrier to entry to play with the thing, because it's kind of like if you're not using it with everything, then it's not really a system. So the system has to be universally done. If you're only partially doing it, then it's not really a system. You don't trust it. And when you're not trusting it, when you don't feel like using the system, you'll be too lazy to jump through those hoops, and then it'll be incomplete, and then the thing will die on you. There's a lot of shelfware out there.
And how about files and offline stuff? How you organize them?
I still have paper files. I just have a simple alpha index paper files, because I've got scanners now, and there's a lot of stuff just easy to scan and comes across in PDF files. And so those are just stored digitally. So I don't have nearly as much paper as I had before, but I still have a file that's for all the, I got a file for Hungarian money I just came back with that I forgot to change in the airport, and I'll probably go back. So where do I keep that? Well, I'm not going to tell you the name of the file, because if you break into my apartment, you can then go find all this international money.
Like currencies, what you call it.
And it's going to be a while before all that's digitalized, or your passport or other things like that. So there's still a good bit of physical stuff and printouts and just backups oftentimes. They know now that paper copies actually last longer than your digital ones. And so, I think people are I love the younger generation says, "Oh, I just don't use any paper anymore." I go, "Yeah, right. Well, just wait, you'll see."
Yeah.
So there's still reasons to do that. Oftentimes it's a lot easier to actually print digital information into a client folder or a project folder, because when I'm going in to meet with a client or talk about this project, it's a lot easier to deal with printout material than it is to try to go find that, page by page in your computer. Paper notebooks, loose leaf planners, there's probably no better tool really than a loose leaf planner to both see your list as well as see reference information, to see how it all integrates much better. It's a lot easier. Even if you had 3 Thunderbolt screens in front of you on your desk, you still can't see the relationship of stuff quite like you can with physical paper. I'm not voting for either one. They both have their downside to them, but people that say it's all going to be digital, I understand it's moving probably more and more in that direction. But there's a retro there's a retro trend out there. People going back to paper.
So let's move to the step 4, reflect. How to reflect.
Well, even if you've captured everything and clarified exactly what it means and organized it all into a nice, pristine system, if you don't look at it or engage with your content, you're still going to be driven by latest and loudest. It'll all crawl back up in your head anyway. So the whole point of this is building a trusted external brain, but it's a kind of a paradox. You actually have to use your mind to be able to get stuff off your mind. In other words, you need to engage cognitively and put really cognitive, mental, focused horsepower on your stuff in some regular basis that then allows you to let go of it and then trust your intuitive and spontaneous judgments. I sort of make the joke that I think about once a week. Really think. I mean, I sit down and look at every single commitment, every single project, bring up the rear guard, catch up all my lists, look at my past calendar, catch all the that reminds me, look at my future calendar, catch all that, those that reminds me.
But those are the actionable items, not the reference. Like if you have some files under specific folder, you don't need to look at that.
That's the point of reference. Reference is to only refer to when required. So that's just as needed data. So there's no need to review that. If it's stuff that needs to be reviewed, that's a different category than reference.
So reflect is all about that you're going to find what you want in a specific place that you already have organized. That's all about external brain that you have somewhere digitally or offline.
Well, everything is an orientation map, really. If you looked at your calendar, I imagine you looked at your calendar in the last 48 hours, you're looking at a map that orients you in space and time. If I'm going to Budapest again, I've got a list already of 3 restaurants that were fabulous. So I'll pull out my restaurant list as a way to orient myself in case I want to take a client to dinner or I want some good food. So all of these things are really checklists. So you could, map, checklist, orientation tool, all of those can be used and need to be used in those functions.
And how you organize, sorry here to cut you off, you organize by location, let's say, or you have a task called restaurants and then you have the countries, and each country there is a specific number of restaurants, or you just have a country and then everything.
Yeah, no, all that's in Evernote. That's what I mentioned before. That's in locales under Evernote. Hey, I'm going to Hungary. Let me punch that up. I punch up Hungary and I go, oh, okay, there's restaurants in Budapest, or here's people I know there. Any random stuff I've collected that I might want to see when I'm going to that location. Context. You'll hear a lot more about context because that's where the computer world is going. It's still very elementary right now with location-based kind of software, which says it notices that you're going home, and so it gives you your at-home list. That's still very elementary and still won't really map to the sophistication of your life. But that's the kind of the direction things are going. Hey, if it knows that I'm going to go to Dubai, right? Then, okay, what's the world according to David in Dubai? And then all that data will be more aggregated for me, as right now I still have to be rather labor intensive and go find it in the various places. But we're going that direction.
And the engage process is all about taking action?
Now, the engage is all about not necessarily, engage could be go to sleep. Well, I'm engaging with my health of my body and my energy. I'm now going to take a nap. That's why I changed the word from my original book. I have do as the 5th stage. But the whole productivity idea has a lot of baggage with it that we're trying to redo right now. Because most people think productivity means work harder, longer. I go, no. Productivity means achieve a desired result. If you're going to try to relax this afternoon and you don't relax, it's an unproductive afternoon. So the whole idea of changing this, so engage just means where are you putting your focus right now? It's not necessarily do physical activity. Many times it is, but meditating is actually engaging. It's a very active process, at least for me. So it's really sort of expanding that idea. Where are you putting your focus and your attention right now? Are you watching your daughter play football, right? And are you on your smartphone? And which one is, what's meaningful to you? So the ability to be able to say, okay, how are you engaged right now? That's where you need to be. The whole point of it is that wherever you decide to put your focus, your attention, or your activity, that it's the right thing to do as far as you're concerned.
So what do you advise people to choose in this critical step? Like, people don't know how to prioritize and what to choose, what is meaningful to them. Like, it's tough sometimes till they reach to a certain point to...
They're deciding all the time. Every time you decide to do something, you've made a priority choice. So everybody's prioritizing all the time. As a matter of fact, you're prioritizing 50,000 times a day. That's how many thoughts they've estimated you'll have today. And you have the freedom to think about whatever you want to think about, whenever you want to think about it. So the choice to do whatever you did, if you want to know how many priorities you have, look at how many things you've done today. At one point, it was a priority to go to the toilet. At one point, it was a priority to eat lunch. At one point, it was a priority to put on your shoes. At one point, it was come on, you're making priority choices all the time. I understand what you're saying. People are going, yeah, but how do I trust that was the thing to do? Well, that's where we've identified the 6 levels of commitments that it's really good that people be aware of how many different levels you've told yourself you ought to, would, could, should, ought to be doing something, because that's really going to drive what your priorities are. And there's 6 horizons. I couldn't get it any simpler than those 6.
So how your life and work routine look like? Like, what you do, what time you wake up, what time you sleep, what you do? Like, do you have a structured day, or like it's changing all the time?
It's changing all the time. The only thing I do consistently is wake up, and even then, not at any consistent time. I sleep as long as I can. I love sleep. Sleep is great. So I usually get 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night at least. That's great. Usually what I'm doing, just very practically speaking, because my calendar is what I refer to as my hard landscape. It lets me know where the time-specific stuff, the day-specific stuff I have to do sometime that day for sure, and then what I need to know about on that day, or what I need to know on that day. So and my calendar is sort of sacred territory just for those 3 things, so that the night before, usually I'm looking to see how long I can sleep. So I look to the next day. Oftentimes I'm looking at a week at a glance just to get a sense of, okay, here's kind of how the week is being structured. Looks like I've got this thing coming toward me, and I've got a big window tomorrow, so that's, I'm starting to set it up that way. So, and the fact is because I do weekly reviews regularly, and as you may know, the weekly review is really a core behavior to keep your external brain current and keep it trusted, and use it for, really creating value and creating good thinking and good strategizing and prioritizing. Because I do that regularly, I don't have to spend a lot of time agonizing over how I'm going to spend my day. Pretty self-evident to me by that point. And I plan as little as I can get by with, because things change so fast, and there are so many different things that show up that I want to have the freedom to do. Sometimes I have to create structure in order to be able to meet some deadlines and meet my agreements with other people. But for the most part, those stay very pristine, and then I work around all those with my other discretionary time and choices.
You don't have a ritual, like you check emails at a specific time, or you check, let's say you write at a specific time, or you just keep changing it all the time?
I just do what I feel like doing.
Okay. Which calendar system you use?
I use the calendar based on Lotus Notes. It's it's much like Outlook has, calendar and email and task management. That Lotus Notes has that as well as an integrated tool. And I need that because other people in my company need to get access into my calendar. My wife, Catherine, she's my executive assistant, manages my calendar. So, she has to have access to that pretty much all the time herself.
And how about not the emails, how you deal with it? Like, you have a gatekeeper, how you structure your emails? You check it twice a day, once a day?
Yeah, whatever. I just make sure I zero it out every 24 to 48 hours, 72 maybe if I'm on a real roll. So it's always a good idea. Generally speaking, I've sort of trained myself to do the most distasteful tasks to begin with in the day. when I have the most energy, to be able to make hard decisions. And then the rest of the day, I snack on email, snack on the web, basically just processing stuff. It's just that a lot of that doesn't take a lot of time. And I keep it pretty clean.
Many of the gurus, like business experts, like trying to keep, let's say, 3 things to-do list in their to-do list every day. How many things you think that we have to take action on in terms of like how important it is? Like they keep big important stuff to do on daily basis.
I'm not sure what you're asking. Most people have between 100 and 200 next actions in terms of their whole inventory of them. It includes everything to buy at the hardware store, everything to talk to their life partner about, all the emails that they need to respond to, all the meetings they need to go to, all the documents they need to draft and edit. So if you add them all up, there's lots of stuff. Most people maintain that as a regular kind of a quota, if you will. There's no hard rule about it, but that tends to be the typical number. Most people have between 30 and 100 projects. So that's a big inventory of things to be picking from, and you're constantly triaging. Now, picking the 1 or 2 or 3 things that are the most important things to get done is not a bad idea. I just wouldn't overstructure yourself and then feel bad if you don't get to them, because the day can change fast. Do they really have to be done? Or are they, in case nothing else happens, those are the things you'd like to do? And I know people that really work my methodology really well. They've got all the digital lists, they've got all their external brain set up, and they, the night before, take a 3x5 card and just handwrite the 3 things they're going to get done the next day if they have time to do it. But they have the freedom to tear that card up and rewrite it again when the day changes. That's fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, essentially, you're prioritizing all the time. Hey, is talking to you right now the thing I really need to do? I may have made a mistake. I don't know. I'll find out. But the whole point is I can very easily see everything I'm not doing and say, no, you're it. That's why my head hasn't gone anywhere else other than this. Most people watching this, their mind's gone all kinds of places aside from what you and I have been talking about, simply because they probably, there's a part of their head that hasn't had that externalized. They don't trust that information and those reminders or those decisions have been made, or reminders parked in a trusted place. So that thing is constantly spinning. So they don't have the ability to be present anywhere.
You don't feel that like always having a different day is overwhelming? Like you don't have like a perfect day actions, like let's say blog post, writing a part of my book, doing one interview. You don't have that structure in your life?
No.
What are the main fundamentals of self-management?
Control and focus. Those are the 2 things. It really kind of boils down to that. They're very closely related to each other. And when I say control, I'm not talking about like controlling your boss or your kids or the weather. I'm talking about having something under control, like your car or a meeting or your desk or your head. Meaning I've got stability. I have the ability to get traction. I have room, space. So that's the, like having your kitchen in control or having a meeting under control. That's what I'm talking about. So that sense of control is really critical. And focus is, again, once you have stability, then okay, where are you pointed yourself? What are you looking at? And they're two different dynamics. They're very closely related. If you're out of control, it's very hard to focus. And if you don't focus, you'll fall out of control. So they're closely related to each other, but they're actually different dynamics.
What's the difference between horizontal and vertical focus?
Well, horizontal would be looking across, sort of orienting yourself across all the aspects of your ecosystem, right? Here's my kids, here's my life, here's my wife, here's my career, here's my finances, here's my health, here's my job, and here's all the different aspects of my job. Being able to see across essentially all of that. So as you go through your day, you're doing this action about that particular part of your job. You're handling this thing, which is about your relationship with your kids. You're having lunch, which is about your relationship to your body. So you're moving across a very, very, very broad, wide spectrum of engagements. So that's your horizontal control, essentially. Vertical says it's time to think about the next holiday and how we plan that and think through that and get the most value out of it. So now I'm going to put blinders on about all of the rest of my life, and now I'm going to focus on this particular theme, topic, problem, or project, and then focus that way. So ideally, it's like, okay, now I've thought about the vacation, now I've come up with all the action steps. I need to now put those into my horizontal view so that when I'm at the store, I also get these 3 things I need for my vacation.
How to get perspective?
Altitude. Step back, take a look around. You know, as we say, you need to manage the forest instead of just hugging the trees. So, and it's very, you can do that internally. It's not a bad idea to build practice in terms of how do I step back. That's why meditative or reflective or contemplative kinds of exercises, you know, or practices are usually very good, because it kind of allows the speed to slow down and things to kind of quiet, so you can hear things at more subtle levels and see things from a higher perspective, if you will. It helps a lot to be doing these practices that I've been talking about, so that your head is not spinning around, I need cat food, and oh, I forgot to tell my boss, and oh, I needed to buy this, and yeah, you know, that stuff, that's noisy. And it's hard to get perspective from that way. Once you quiet that, then to be able to use the different horizons that we have. What are all the projects that you have? Stop and take a look. Oh, that reminds me. Just looking across your calendar for the next 6 months will give you a different altitude.
So focusing on one project is a vertical focus. Mm-hmm. And what are the 5 phases of project planning?
Well, as I identified what we naturally do all the time. We naturally are planning all the time. And you do that by, first of all, you have a purpose. Hey, I want to have something happen, you know, so purpose is the top driver of it. What's the intention here? What's the reason for this? And then your first natural thoughts are, okay, here's what it would look like if this is finished or successful. So the vision of success, you're a writer, producer, director, you go, okay, this is going to look like this, or here's what dinner is going to be, or here's the way the strategic plan is going to roll out, or here's the company I'm going to buy. You know, and all that will be done successfully. Once you hold a vision in your imagination that's actually not matched by reality, it actually creates a tension that then you start to brainstorm. It creates a storm in your brain. Oh, wait a minute, that vision is separate from what I am. So what you do is, that's idea generation, potentially relevant stuff. Oh, I need to call the bank. Yeah, but we need to talk to them. Well, what about the people that are going to be on this? Yeah, but and actually what you start doing then is a random generation of potentially relevant data and ideas, brainstorming, if you will. So that's stage 3. At a certain point, you can't help it. Once you generate all that data, you go, well, wait a minute, that's more important than that, or that happens first, or these are the critical components to this. So then you start to organize, which is phase 4. Then you take all that potentially relevant data and say, how relevant is this idea versus this one? And that's where you bring in your rational, critical, analytical part of your mind to say, well, okay, look, since here's where we're going, here's our plan. Essentially, that's the stage that you would create okay, let's stage step 1, 2, 3, 4, or here's the 3 major components and the 4 subcomponents of each one, or here's the priorities on this, here's the 3 things that really have to happen critically to make this successful. And that's where you bring in that kind of thinking. That's stage 4. Stage 5, assuming you want to have this thing happen, then you say, how do I allocate resources? What's the next action based upon all that thinking? So you look at your plan or look at your organization and say, okay, what's first? What's the next action? What's the very next step? What's the moving part here that we need to start moving the needle on this thing on? So those are the 5 steps: is purpose, vision, brainstorm, organize, next action.
So can you explain to us more about the power of next action and the power of outcome focusing?
Yeah, well, that's good business. You know, what are we trying to accomplish? How do we allocate resources to make that happen? That is what that's essentially the productivity equation. Or what are we trying to accomplish? How do we make it happen with the least amount of resources, essentially? But you still have outcome and action. Those are really 2 different things. What are we trying to accomplish? And essentially, that's the essence of getting things done, is what does done mean? And what does doing look like? And where does that happen? What does done mean is not that simple a question to answer. What does done mean in terms of this new hire? That's finished when what's true. When they've just signed on, or when you make sure that the immune system of your company hasn't spit them out after 2 months. When are you done with getting this person on board? So there's a lot of subtlety oftentimes in defining what is the outcome I'm really after. What are we trying to accomplish here? But the next action, that's so powerful, because what that does is it really makes you honest about how real is this thing. Are you really willing to commit to what's the very next physical thing that needs to happen, and who's going to do that? And the next action needs to be a very specific, physical, visible thing. Set meeting is not a next action, because there are lots of ways and places you could set the meeting. Is that an email to send? Is it a conversation to have with your assistant to have him or her set it up? Is that a walk over to their desk and look at their calendar? How exactly would you do this physically? So if you haven't done that, If you've got a commitment about elder care for your parents, or you've got a commitment about your next holiday and organizing that, or you've got a commitment about restructuring your department, or you've got a commitment about increasing your bank credit line, but you haven't got the very specific next physical action required, you're not keeping your commitment with yourself. And there's a part of you that will still be bugged and frustrated and stressed because you haven't decided what exactly to do yet. It still says you still have decision to make and thinking you need to do about this. That's why most people's lists don't have those. They usually don't have either one. They don't have the clear outcome identified, nor do they have the specific next action decided or identified. And that means they actually don't want to look at the list because it reminds them of thinking and decision making they haven't finished yet about these commitments. And people say, well, I don't have the energy to think and decide. Stop reminding me I'm overwhelmed. And most people's experience with their planners or their lists or their organization is actually fatigue, because what they're being reminded of is still incomplete decision making and thinking. So what's the very next action toward what specific outcome? That actually takes cognitive horsepower to do. Those don't show up automatically. Most people's lists that I look at aren't even close. When we coach, executives desk side or anybody desk side, it usually takes 2 days to get people set up one-on-one, literally with them at their desk. The first thing is just to capture all the stuff that has their attention. And that takes anywhere from 1 to 6 hours just to get the inventory of stuff that they then need to decide about. And then it takes the rest of 2 days to have them go through each one of those items and each one of those emails saying, okay, what's the next action? Is there an outcome you need to identify about this? And it takes, and as well as clarifying what's reference and what's trash and going through the clarification process takes a lot of energy. And it takes a focused energy to do that. So it's not going to happen just by wandering around in your life. You actually have to sit down and think to decide what to do.
How to manage the interruptions, like continuously, like we have interruptions in our life, and also procrastination?
There are no interruptions. There's just mismanaged inputs. I mean, what's an interruption? Something you shouldn't get or something you should get? If
something urgent came up, like example.
You should get it. Why is that an interruption? Oh, come on, there's the one organization that never has interruptions or crises is the fire department, right?
Because they know that this is their job.
Because that's input.
That's what they do.
That's what they do.
So you work with so many individuals, big companies, organizations. Like, what's the perfect and the most efficient workplace from like how you see it?
One that's implemented the getting things done methodology. Open workspaces are awful in terms of productivity unless people catch this methodology. Because then, if you catch this methodology, you're not interrupting people. You don't need to. You send them an email, they'll respond. It doesn't mean you don't interact with people. As a matter of fact, it frees up your interaction to be more social and more amiable and more whatever, instead of trying to get business done by walking over and standing in front of them at their desk. So in those environments, once you have people who get GTD and the getting things done methodology as a culture, those environments are great. They're quiet. They move. They're very quick and very fast and very quiet. And you can see that. You'll see that with people who get this kind of behavior. If people don't have that, there's a lot of inappropriate, bothering inputs. Yes, that's where you get a lot of what people refer to as interruptions, because people just walk up to your desk and say, "Excuse me, could you just put that in a note? Couldn't you send me an email about that?" But if you're not emptying your email, then you can't expect them to do that. So, it works off each other. It's really great when people around you also have this set of behaviors, because then it moves you up the food chain organization.
In 2008, you wrote How to Make It All Work, a book, maybe after 8 years from getting things done. What was the purpose of the book? How to make it, like after the process of getting things done, what next? Like how to make it all work?
It was really more taking it wider and deeper and really understanding the implications of it. Getting things done was really just a tactical manual. It was basically, look, here's the techniques and a few kind of by the ways that you may discover when you do this, and it walked you through that. Making it all work was really the larger context of what the model is and why it took off and why it sort of spread around the world the way it did.
Any other new book coming soon?
Well, I've rewritten Getting Things Done. I have a new revised version of that's going to be published in the spring, in March. So that was kind of fun. It was time to rewrite it. What didn't change was the core principles and the core methodology and the core techniques. A number of things have changed. Obviously, the world is a lot more digital. But again, that doesn't change the methodology. As I say, in the new forward in the new introductory chapter, it's sort of like in 2090 when we land on Jupiter, they still need an in basket to capture potentially relevant stuff, and they're still going to have to decide what the next action is about everything in there to get off the planet. So these techniques are eternal. They're going to be good forever. But again, getting the languaging up to sort of current time and more of the kind of world that people are dealing with. Also, I've included in there a good bit of the new data that's shown up in cognitive science that's validated the getting things done methodology, like why the external brain is really not just a nice to have, it's a must have for people to have a sustainable lifestyle these days. And, so there's cool stuff in there. And, just change the languaging really to be more universal. A lot of what's changed, Ahmed, is that when I first wrote the book, the hungriest audience for it, and we targeted that, was the fast track professional. So you see me with suit and tie on the front of the book, and and a lot of it was kind of programmed around getting things done and productivity, which was a key issue and a key area. And the fast track, mid to senior level professionals were the ones most getting bombarded by the new world of email and overwhelm and too much to do and flattened organizations and globalization and all those kinds of pressures that sort of.
So more examples in it, more explanation, more examples. It's a bigger book. Definitely.
No, yeah, there's 3 additional chapters in it, but really a lot of it is more the audience that's expanded. I mean, the clergy, students, homemakers, doctors, attorneys, rock musicians, artists, that I knew even before I wrote the first book that it was powerful for everybody. But I think we're repositioning it really more as a lifestyle craft about how do you manage the flow of life's work, and really understanding that it's the path of, as we call it, the path of GTD mastership is a lifetime thing. I mean, how good can you get at speaking Italian? How good can you get at fencing? How good can you get at cooking? How good can you get at parenting? How good can you get at your spiritual practices? I mean, come on. So how good can you get at getting things done, or in terms of what this methodology is? But again, it was kind of an apology that using the word productivity, as I mentioned, has a good bit of baggage to it. And a lot of people think about business or busyness when they think of productivity, and not about relaxed lifestyle, and meaningful, cool, spontaneity, which is to me why I did it to begin with. So we've been really rebranding and repositioning ourselves to be actually a lot more authentic about who we are and how we are.
So getting things done is not about getting things done?
No, it's not really. It's about being appropriately engaged with your world. Now, to be appropriately engaged with your world, you probably need to have some level of engagement with getting things done. But appropriate engagement, I mean, come on, how many things are you and I not doing right now while we're talking to each other? So the only reason we can be present and have fun doing this and have time disappear is to make sure that we're appropriately engaged with everything else. But you better know what that is, as opposed to kidding yourself that you think you know what it is and hope it's not going to blow up on you. That's not appropriate engagement.
So what's the long-term success and purpose of David Allen? How much you achieved from it?
Hey, as much good as we can do in the world with this methodology before I check out. So again, I just said, well, practice what I preach. Let me see how efficiently, with how little effort, I can improve how many lives on the planet. So that's what I'm doing.
What are your other hobbies?
I love good wine. I love good food. I love exploring really beautiful cities. That's why we moved to Amsterdam. And you'll see if you look out my window here, it just rained and it's gorgeous. I'm right across the street from the Rijksmuseum. It's lovely. So sort of experimenting and experiencing a new culture, especially one that's so as global and interesting as the Netherlands and Amsterdam is. So that's kind of a hobby. I love flower arranging. That's my little Japanese pots and getting flowers and walking with my dog and enjoying the air and just enjoying being relaxed and spontaneous.
What are the most important 3 factors for success in 3 words?
Authenticity, Um, Clarity and stability.
What's the biggest failure point in your life, and what did you learn from it?
I don't think I've had any failures. I mean, the way I see it, they all got me here. So,
Feedback.
just all feedback. Yeah, course correction, a lot of course correction for sure. I've done, experimented with a lot of things that sort of took me off the edge of the pier, too far. And whoops, but I learned from that. I wouldn't trade the experiences for that, because it certainly taught me, both where those edges are and also how to get back. And I learned a lot in those processes. I think probably the biggest mistake was not trusting myself in terms of my heart, and what the most honest and real part of me was really about. And when I didn't listen to that, for too long a period of time. But again, just live and learn, because I learned that there is that place in there, and it's still work to do to make sure I'm operating from that space instead of some other place that's suboptimal.
So what's the advice that you give to your younger self if you have the chance?
Relax and have more fun.
What are the habits that you're trying to develop to stay efficient?
Habits to stay efficient. I have all the habits already, so I just need to maintain them. It's kind of like the better you get at this, the better you better get at this, because the lazier it lets you be. I give myself lots of permission to not have to think about a lot of things, so I can sort of move around spontaneously. So, still watching that edge, so I don't let myself go too far. But I'm, by this point, look, I'll be 69 in a couple of weeks. So, by this point, having worked with this material for 35 years, it's pretty ingrained in me to know when I'm off. And I fall off regularly. Heck, if you're not falling off this game regularly, you're probably not playing a big enough game. It's just I don't have any excuses, because I know how to get back on when I want to.
How do you change your mood when you're depressed? What do you do?
Move around. Physical movement. Nothing beats it.
So you go out, change the location.
Or clean a drawer, or wash the dishes, or go play with my dog. She never has a problem.
Yeah, they say dogs always makes you live in the moment.
Yeah.
Top 3 apps that you use on your smartphone.
Top 3. Google Maps, especially traveling around the world these days. It's absolutely critical. So Google Maps, words with friends. I'm waiting in line, playing Scrabble with my friends around the world. It's fun to do, at least a way to kill the time. I read the New York Times. I read The Week. Then I have that on my smartphone. That's another way to, if I'm in a weird window of time and want to do something with her about that. All the typical other kinds of stuff in terms of calendar and email and things like that. I'll check from time to time. But that's pretty much it. I don't spend a lot of time on the smartphone.
Do you listen to any music when you work?
I do. Usually when I'm working, I'll listen to classical music. So I have a playlist of just classical music that I listen to. I love Vivaldi and Bach, and the sort of instrumental Baroque classical music is probably my ideal. But yeah.
Do you follow any routine to sleep?
No.
You just switch off.
I switch off. And I started taking naps too. I learned that from Tony Schwartz. Tony's a friend of mine now, and he wrote in the Energy Project, and he aggregated a lot of the research about sleep, and there's a lot out there now about how absolutely critical sleep is to refresh your brain, and so I think 22-minute power nap at about 2:00 in the afternoon. So I started doing that just habitually, and I go out in about 5 minutes. That's great.
Which kind of books you like? Your favorite books, if you can share a couple with us.
I don't spend a lot of time reading right now. Read really neat history stuff about Amsterdam and places we've moved. So I like that intellectual history, cultural history. That's cool. I get sent probably a book every week or two for in my endorsement. So sometimes, I just, many of those I just don't have the time to scan them unless they're really right in my sites. But every month or two, there's usually some really good one that shows up that I really like. I can't say there are any favorites. Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit, was a really great one. Adam Grant's book, Giving. A Give and Take. Yeah, Adam Grant. Lovely book out there. But there've been probably hundreds since, over the last 30 years.
What are the things that makes you really happy?
Being able to improve other people's lives and being able to contribute to that so that they expand their own freedom and their own sense of expression and expansion. There's nothing better than that.
Last question, how people can contact you?
I'm David at davidco.com, D-A-V-I-D at davidco.com. And our website, gettingthingsdone.com, has lots of cool stuff that people can surf around there and see a lot about this methodology.
Thank you so much for this great technical details and life journey. Amazing. Thank you, David. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Amin. Good luck to all of you.
Thanks, everyone. Be efficient and stay efficient, and see you soon with another leading expert.